everybody, Krista Cowan here with another edition of the Barefoot Genealogist. Today we're going to be talking about finding your ancestors in hometown histories. Now, a couple of months ago we talked about newspapers, and some of what we're going to talk about today is going to be a repeat of that, but we've got lots of new people, and hopefully you've been using the newspapers a little bit, and so this is an opportunity to have a refresher course. I'm a big fan of repetition and learning. Also, we're going to have a few bonus tips for you today, so hopefully you'll stick with us through the full 20 minutes so that we can give you some new ideas about ways to find your ancestors. With that introduction, let's get started. So, the very first thing you're going to want to do when you're interested in looking into newspapers is become a little bit more familiar with the geography of the area where your ancestors lived. Now, there's lots of ways to do that. Here's how I do that. I just use a map program in a web browser, and I'll type in the name of the community where my family lived, the one that I'm interested in learning more about. Now, oftentimes, especially if it's a small community, it'll zoom you in really tight to that area, and you can see it's not a big town, kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? So if you zoom out a little bit, and I just go one click at a time because I want to pay attention to what's happening around the community, you'll start to notice things like the names of other small communities that are around. Hopefully you already know the county that your community is in, but what you'll start to notice then is other counties that border that community. Pay attention to that. One of the other things you'll want to notice is if your community that you're interested in is near a state border. This right here is the border between Arkansas and Missouri. And so this community is actually closer to some larger communities in Missouri, like Branson, than it is to some of the larger communities in this corner of Arkansas, like Fayetteville or Bentonville. So pay attention to those kinds of things. Just like I said, just get a map, plug in the name of your community, and just one click at a time, start to explore what's going on. Become familiar with the names of some of the smaller towns in the area. The reason why is because a lot of small communities would publish newspapers years ago, even if they're not a large community now, even if they don't even have a current newspaper. And so you just never know what you're going to find. So that's the first place I start is with a map, and just one click at a time, zoom your way out from that community to see what else is in that region. Really important, and I'll show you why here in just a minute. The next thing you're going to want to do is browse the newspaper titles in the card catalog on Ancestry.com. So on Ancestry.com, the card catalog, for those of you who are new, if you just hover over search and go all the way down to card catalog, that's where you're going to find it. Over here on the left-hand side, you have filters. We're going to filter by collection down to newspapers. And then again down to newspapers. We split out newspapers and periodicals. You're going to notice here that Ancestry.com has over 1,300 newspaper titles. Now, I don't expect you to go through every one of them. Again, use these filters over here. There's a couple of different options. You can filter by location, which is what we're going to do here in a minute, or you can filter by date. Sometimes you can even just filter by a century. If we were to click on this, you'd discover that Ancestry actually has newspapers that go back to the mid-1700s, and I think our most current newspapers go through 2003 or 2004. So you can narrow it down by century, or what we're going to do in this case is narrow it down by location. So I'm going to click down to the United States, and then I'm going to click on the state that I'm interested in. Now you'll notice here, next to each state, it lists the number of titles or databases that exist for that state. My state that I'm interested in for the moment only has 8. But some of these states, if you scroll down, you'll notice California has 62. Iowa is always my favorite example. Iowa has 189, lots of newspapers that were being published there that have been digitized. And so you can kind of get a feel for if you're going to have to narrow things down more. One of the reasons why geography is so important. If you're looking in a state like Iowa, you're going to need to know a little bit more about the geography of that place. Now I'm interested in Arkansas. There's only 8 titles. When I click on that, those 8 titles are going to come up over here. Now, pay attention to the records. Not that you wouldn't care about smaller databases, but larger databases give you an idea of how many editions of that newspaper there are, how many things you're going to have to filter through. Now, obviously, I'm going to probably be most interested in this Northwest Arkansas Times. It was published out of Fayetteville, but the fact that it's called Northwest Arkansas Times gives me an idea that maybe it's going to cover that whole northwest corner of that state that I'm interested in. Once you click on that, okay, and that takes us to our next tip. Once you click on that, I would recommend that you check the dates available before you just start searching. Lots of these newspapers either weren't published for very long, or they were only published once a week, or they didn't start publishing them until after your ancestor left that place. So you just need to be familiar with the date range that is even available in what's been digitized before you start searching, so that you know what it is that you're looking for. That information is going to be right here on the right hand side of the screen once you click to that title, right? And you can see what's available by clicking on this little calendar browse here. So this particular collection, what's been digitized, starts in 1937 in July. And you can see here that it was published once a week, and it goes through 1977 December, whereby then it was being published every single day, with the exception, it looks like here, probably of a Christmas holiday. So the time frame, or the time span, 1937 to 1977, you want to know, because you want to know which ancestors you're looking for, if they even lived in that place during the time that you're searching. It's also good to just get an idea of how frequently that newspaper was being published during the different time periods, so that you know what it is that you're looking for. Okay, once you've done that, there's a couple of different ways that you can search newspapers. Now, you're going to see here in a minute that newspapers are indexed a little bit differently. We don't actually have people who go through and read every page of the newspaper and pick out names, dates, and places. And so the typical search, like that you would do through a census database or through a birth, marriage, or death database, is going to be a little different. Newspapers are actually indexed by a computer. So because they're typeset, a computer just reads that and indexes every word. And the computer doesn't know if this word is a place or if this word is a name. So there's a couple of different ways that you can search. I would recommend that you do targeted searches by names and dates based on what you're interested in, but also try to do just general surname searches or keyword searches. And I'll show you how to do both of those here. Okay, so the first thing that I would do is I would look for somebody specifically. So my great-grandmother was from there. She died when I was about 2 years old, and I met her a couple of times. I don't remember it, but I have photographic evidence. And so I might look for her. Kerr is her married name. When I'm looking for somebody, of course, after they've been married, that's what I'm going to put in. If I was looking for her before her marriage, I would put in her maiden name. But she was married in 1910, and if you remember, this particular edition starts in 1937, so probably not going to find her under her maiden name. Now, she died in 1974, so I'm just going to plug that in, and with just that information, I'm going to do a search. What you're going to see here is the very first thing that comes up is her obituary. Now, you'll see here 27 February 1974. I actually am not going to click on this. I'm going to right click on it, and some of you have seen me do this, and I'm going to open that link in a new tab. The reason I do that is because it allows me to toggle back and forth between my search results page, this page, and the actual record or document that I'm looking at. Okay. The reason I do that, well, there's lots of reasons I do that, but you'll see here there are other search results that I might be interested in. this snippet here is from 1967, and the very thing that I can read here says survivors are the widow, Mrs. Lenora Kerr. So chances are this is the obituary for my great-grandfather. I can skim down here further and see if there's anything else I'm interested in looking at that I might want to open. And it doesn't look like it right just off the top of my head, but now I've got these results here that I can actually look at. Now, newspaper page, make sure you use these image features. I could zoom all the way out. Actually, here, if I just do fit height, right? There's the whole page of the newspaper. Clearly, I can't read that, okay? I can zoom in, and you'll notice that there are things that are highlighted on the page. If you can't find what you're looking for, try using this next hit button. And what it'll do is it'll jump you to the place on the page where the terms that you searched for exist. So if you remember, I searched for the year 1974. I didn't mark it exact, so what it's highlighting here is 1975, 1972, right? It's done a range for me. I can just keep clicking next hit, and you'll notice that it takes these yellow highlights and it turns them green when it's on it. And eventually it's going to jump me to the names or the specific keywords that I searched for. Okay, and then once I find the section of the page that I'm interested in, I can zoom in and actually read that a little bit better, right? I can then take this and attach it to her. I can click this save button up here and attach it to her in my tree. I can transcribe this, which I always do, transcribe it to make sure that I have all of the information that I need out of that particular record. So once I've done that, then I can just close. Remember, I don't have to go back and forth between screens because I've opened this in a new tab. I can just close this and move on to the next record that I'm interested in. And sure enough, Albert Jefferson Kerr, there's my great-grandfather's obituary, and I can read the information there. Again, save it to him, transcribe what's written there, close it, and it takes me right back to my search screen. Okay, so that's how I use newspapers. The other thing that I would recommend doing is some more general searches, right? So my family lived in this part of Arkansas actually for generations, and so there's lots and lots of cousins and ancillary families. My grandmother, those great-grandparents there, they had 12 children, 5 of whom were girls. And so one of the things I might want to try is looking up their last name with a keyword of that contains the last name of some of those daughters as they got married. Oftentimes, small town newspapers would record people coming and going, right? Mr. and Mrs. Herb Beatty visited their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Albert Kerr in Green Forest today. And so you'll start to see some of those connections if you use some of those other search terms. So again, I'll put in the last name and then put in maybe some connected families like sons-in-laws into this keyword field and do searches that way to see if I can pop articles that connect those families. Okay, so that's targeted searches by name and date, and then some general searches by surname only using some keywords. The last thing that I would recommend as it relates to newspapers is to browse editions of the newspaper around the time of events in your ancestors' lives. And the reason I do this is just to get a feel for what was going on both in the world, right, because there's obviously going to be world news in most newspapers, but also in their community. So just because my ancestor isn't specifically mentioned in a newspaper doesn't mean that I'm not going to learn something about what was going on in their community. I do family history not just to fill in the blanks on a chart about when they were born and when they were married and when they died, but I also want to come to know them and understand what was happening in their lives. I have this great love for history, and so even local history is fascinating to me when I realize that, my grandparents met at a softball game. And I always loved when my grandma told that story about how she met my grandfather at a softball game. And I can actually go and look up the community softball league that was in their community at the time that they met in the early 1940s, and learn a little bit more. One of the other things you're going to notice when you do searches is that a lot of people in newspapers weren't recorded by their full names. Oftentimes women are only referred to as Mrs. and then her husband's name, and sometimes the men are only referred to by their initials for lots of reasons. Probably a lot of it had to do just with space in the newspaper. And so don't always put in a first name, especially not if you're looking for things like a softball game, right, where it may have listed the members of the team, but only by their last name. And so you can do some different searches that way to see, who's doing what in the community. Use keywords like softball to see if you can find an article that refers to the game that was being played in the community at the time, or the league. Lots of just different fun things you can play with to get yourself familiar with the area and the times and the histories. Okay, that's all. We're going to spend time on newspapers. For our last few minutes, I just want to talk about another kind of hometown history that really will help you get a feel for your ancestors, and some of you may even get really lucky and find lots of information about your ancestors, and that's family and local histories. The family and local histories, again, you're going to need to learn more about the geography of the area where your ancestors lived. Certainly, you need to know the name of the county when your ancestor lived there. Keep in mind, county boundaries change and did a lot through the 1800s, and so you need to know what the county was when they were living there, what it is now, if it was anything in between, if it was 2 or 3 counties. I have one family who was from West Virginia now, but they never moved, and yet they lived in 4 different counties in 2 different states because the boundaries changed around them as West Virginia became a state. And so be really familiar with what that place was when they were there and what it has morphed into to now, so that you know what you're looking for. Again, you're going to want to browse the titles in the card catalog so that you're familiar with what's available. Here is how you do that. So again, you're going to go to your card catalog. You're going to see all 30,000 plus databases that Ancestry has. You're going to find these family and local histories over here under Stories, Memories, and Histories. And once you click on that, you're going to see some additional options here. We've got family histories, which is a whole nother topic, right? Oral histories, social and place histories, which is what we're going to look at, society and organizational histories, military histories, and then some royalty, nobility, and heraldry books that we've digitized. So we're interested right now for these purposes in social and place histories. When I click on that, it's going to show you that we've got 20,000 titles that fall into that. Now it's going to sort them by popularity. I like to sort them by database title. You can choose how to do that. Again, you can filter by century or decade, or I would recommend filtering it by place first for sure. So for these purposes, I'm interested, you can see thousands of titles for each of these states. I'm interested in the state of Ohio. So I'm going to click on that. That's going to drop me down to 7,500 titles, still a lot, right? So what I would recommend when you're doing searches for local histories is to go down one level further, which is to the county. Now you can see again, you've got the number listed by county. You want to be familiar with what the county was and what it is now, and if it's been anything in between, because you might need to look at a few of these. I'm interested for these purposes in Ashland County. So my family, on my dad's side of the family, is from Ashland, Ohio. They lived in that area for a couple of generations, and I think at one point my 3rd great-grandfather was the postmaster general there. I think the town the town archives is actually an old family home. So you'll see I have 4 titles here. One, it looks like, is a military history of the whole state of Ohio in these particular wars. So it probably just includes information about people from Ashland. This one, it looks like, is a historical sketch of this specific township in Ashland County and Savannah, which is a village in that township. So this one right here, a history of the pioneer and modern times of Ashland County. That looks interesting, so I might be interested in that one. Again, I'm going to right click on it, open it in a new tab, and then this top one, history of North Central Ohio, embracing all of these counties. And as I look at this, I'm reminded, oh yeah, I don't just have family in Ashland County, I have family in Wayne County and Medina County and Lorain County, and so really I would probably be interested in that one as well. Now, just like when you were in the newspapers, once you find a title that you're interested in, you're going to want to, before you start searching, take a look at how it's organized so that you have an idea of what you're getting yourself into. The table of contents for almost all of these books is going to be listed here on the right hand side. Now you'll notice here, I could actually click on one of these and it would take me directly to the book. And it would open it up here in this window, and I could, say I want to see the whole page, right? And then I could just scroll through this book one page at a time here using this little arrow as if I was just reading the book. And there are people who do that. I've done that actually with this specific book, okay? So certainly one of the ways you can do that. You can just start at the beginning and read your way through the book. Or if you find something that looks interesting, right, a particular chapter that looks interesting, you can jump directly to that chapter and start reading that. Now, one of the things that I love about these local histories is you're probably going to find information about maybe some of your relatives throughout the chapters, but most of these books near the end will have specific chapters on the individual communities in that county. And those individual community chapters will oftentimes have biographies and sometimes even pictures of members of that community, especially the pioneer or founding members or any prominent members from the time that the community was founded until the time that the book was published. And that publication information is going to be clearly on the title page, but also here in the source information, you can see that this particular book was published in 1931. Again, I'm just going to do a search on a general search on a surname to see what comes up. And I can tell you here, this is an uncle and this is an uncle. These are all uncles. This is my great-great-great-grandfather here. Again, I'm going to right-click on those, open those up in a new tab so that I can read what's going on and still get back to my original search results. You'll see here this kind of mentions him. It's green highlighted. In the middle of a paragraph or the middle of a section, I can just click back a page to read more about what they're talking about so that I understand the context of how he's mentioned. So unfortunately, we're out of time. Let's just run through the last couple of things here. Again, you're going to do your searches. I do these actually reversed of how I do the newspaper searches. So if you remember with newspaper searches, I do the targeted searches first and then the general searches second. With these, I'm usually going to do the general searches by surname first just to see what pops up in those search results. And then if there's too many search results, if I have a common last name or for those of you especially where your last name's a noun or a verb, sometimes I feel bad for you. I actually have been researching some Browns lately, so I understand your frustration. Then I'll start to target those searches a little bit better. And then again, I would just really recommend that you read through some of those chapters to get a feel for that community, how it was founded and how it grew up and what changed so that you have an understanding of what it was like when your ancestor came there and what kinds of things they encountered as they struggled to build a life, and maybe even you'll get an understanding through some of that reading about why they may have left that place. I remember reading a history of Kentucky and understanding that my whole family just left there, and I couldn't figure out why until I started to read through some of these histories and realized there had been a big earthquake and then there were some weather problems that caused all the crops to fail several years in a row, and so they clearly left because they weren't able to make a living there. So I would recommend that you do that. That's all we have time for today. In fact, I think I went a few minutes over. If you have any questions, you can email me at ask@ancestry.com. I do read through, our team does read through all of those emails. We don't respond personally to those emails, but we do pick and choose from those so that we can feature you maybe in our next episode as we help other people with that. Everybody has the same questions, we're discovering. Oftentimes it's just a matter of taking the principles of genealogy research and applying them to your specific challenge. So until next time, this is Krista Cowan. I hope you have fun climbing your family tree. Bye-bye.